Good afternoon, students of the Jamaica School of Preaching and Biblical Studies, and to all of you joining us live on YouTube, or who will be joining us later at your own convenience to see a saved version of this class. We're going to begin our class in Communication Studies, which is the basic level of English, after we have gone to God in prayer. God is the one who gives us the mind to learn. So we're going to God to ask Him to help us to learn. Father in heaven, we pray that you may give us an understanding mind, that we will be able to learn important matters concerning the English language, so that we may be able to use it in our daily lives. In Jesus' name, amen. We're going to be going through the test quickly that was done last week, Thursday, about this time, and then we will move on to the next lessons. You were, sorry, I'm in Hebrew. Excuse me, sorry. Yes, we're looking at test number 3, different styles of writing. And we're looking at the answers to these tests. Questions. Number 1, define the descriptive style of writing. You didn't have to write out everything I have here, but I put this means to write words to let the readers see, hear, smell, touch, and taste what a person, place, or thing looks like, sounds like, smells like, feels like, or tastes like. Use is made of adjectives, similes, metaphors, and other literary devices. It is writing words to paint pictures so that people may know what a person, place, or thing looks like without having necessarily seen these things personally. Any question on descriptive style of writing? Number 2, define the narrative style of writing. This means to write words to tell a story. The story may be real, such as non-fiction, or it may be made up by the writer, such as fiction. It consists of scenes. A scene is the time when this took place, the place where this took place, or the history, the historical background of the story. Characters has to do with the people in the story. Some are good, some are bad. One of them might be the hero of the story, who is trying to promote what is good. Another might be someone who is promoting what is bad, and so there's a struggle. And then the story shows you how the problem is solved or sorted out. Number 3, define the expository style of writing. This means to write words to explain, to give information, to impart facts to the reader. Any question? Number 4, define the persuasive style of writing. This means to write words to convince the readers about the truth of what you are writing about, and to lead them to act on the information that you are writing about. Number 5, give an example of the descriptive style of writing. Answer: here's a good description from Song of Solomon, chapter 4, verse 1. Solomon, using metaphors and similes to describe the beauty of one of his wives. You know, in the Old Testament, God allowed these people to have more than one wife. But in the beginning, the law concerning marriage was that there should be one man and one woman joined together. What Jesus has done is to restore the law concerning marriage that was in the beginning. So here is Solomon writing about this beautiful woman, and he writes, "Behold, thou art fair, my love. Behold, thou art fair. Thou hast dove's eyes within thy locks." Now, it does not mean that she literally had the eyes of a dove, because we're dealing with a woman, and a woman is not a bird. But he was using a metaphor, which is an implied comparison between the way the dove's eyes look and the way that this woman's eyes look. So we see that one of the things that drew Solomon's attention to this woman was the beauty of her eyes. Her eyes look really nice. And so he describes her eyes as dove's eyes. And then he describes her hair, which obviously is another means of Solomon being attracted to this woman. "Thy hair is as a flock of goats that appear from Mount Gilead." So here is a mountain, and there are on the mountain different goats that have covered the top of the mountain, and they are coming down the mountain. So you get the picture of a woman. The woman's head is like the mountain, and her long hair coming down are like these goats coming down from the mountain. So this is what you call simile, when you introduce a comparison by saying "as." Thy hair is as a flock of goats. Or "like." A metaphor is when you don't introduce a comparison by saying "as" or "like." So this is a descriptive style of writing. Number 6, give an example of the narrative or the storytelling style of writing. Well, here is one narrative in the book of Genesis. "Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age. And he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him." So in the beginning of the story, you learn what the problem is. The problem is jealousy. Joseph is being treated better than the rest of us. We hate him. We want to get rid of him. So at the very beginning of the story, you learn about the problem that needs to be resolved. Joseph is the champion in the story. In literary terminology, in literary language, we would call him the protagonist, someone who works and champions a particular cause. And his brothers, you would call them the antagonist, someone who works against someone who is promoting something good. And the problem is Joseph is being looked at as being better than the rest of us. So we will get rid of him. Well, they try to get rid of him, but God worked it out for the good of everyone. For near to the end of the narrative in the book of Genesis, it says, God sent me before you to preserve you a posterity, or to preserve you descendants in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you that sent me hither, but God, and he hath made me a father to Pharaoh. In other words, I'm an advisor to Pharaoh. And Lord of all his house, I'm in charge of everything in his household, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. Number 7, give an example of the expository style of writing in the Bible. Well, this example is a good one. All have sinned and come short of the glory of God, being justified freely by his grace through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus, Romans chapter 3, verses 23 to 24. What Paul is doing in the epistle to the Romans is to show that everybody is guilty of sin. The Gentiles who didn't know the true God, and the Jewish people who are God's people, who knew God's laws better than anybody else, everybody is guilty of sin. But through the blood of Jesus, though we are guilty, God can justify us by declaring us not guilty. Not because of how good you have been, but even though you have not been good, but you have put your faith in Jesus, God can declare you not guilty. So he uses technical terms which he explains as he writes the book of Romans. That's expository. Number 8, give an example of the persuasive style of writing in the Bible. Well, here's an example from Acts chapter 14, verse 15. After Paul had healed a crippled man at Lystra, and the people of Lystra thought that the gods had come down from heaven, because they couldn't believe that an ordinary human being could do this. So they started to worship Paul and Barnabas as gods. And both of these men ran through the crowd, tearing their outer garments in shock and in grief. And this is what they were trying to persuade the crowd not to do. And saying, Sirs, why do ye these things? We also are men of like passions with you. We have the same feelings as you people have. And preach unto you that ye should turn from these vanities, that is, these gods that can't do anything, and turn unto the living God, which made heaven and earth and the sea, and all things that are therein. Now, you might use persuasive speech, but it doesn't necessarily mean it will convince the person to do what you have said. They were not persuaded, no matter what these men said. They know that they had seen a man that was crippled immediately stand up and begin to walk. And so they said, these men are not men, these are gods that look like men. And no matter what Paul and Barnabas tried to say to persuade them not to worship them, they wanted to continue to worship them. But it's a persuasive style of writing. Here we find they were saying it by word of mouth. Luke, the writer of Acts, later put it in his book, Acts of the Apostles. Okay, is there any question? Okay, we're going to move on to the next lesson, and that is report writing. Let me check my time. Okay. We're looking at writing reports. General objectives: to examine simple report writing format. 2, to examine report using memoranda format. 3, to examine report writing guidelines. Specific objectives. At the end of this lesson, the students will have been able to describe the format of simple report writing. 2, at the end of this lesson, the students will have been able to outline the memoranda format of report writing. 3, at the end of this lesson, the students will have been able to outline report writing guidelines. Now here is a simple report writing format. Number 1, you have the summary of your report. So a busy person can look at the summary and know in a few seconds what the report is all about. So there is a summary at the beginning, which is a brief summary of the contents, focusing on the key points. And it should be about half a page to 1 page in length. That's the summary. Then after the summary, you have the introduction. And the introduction has what you plan to say and provides a brief summary of the problem under discussion. And it should touch briefly on your conclusions. Then the third section of the report writing format is the main body, the main part of the report, in which you lead the reader through the issues or through the problems, pointing out any areas of difficulty and disagreement. And after that, you have the conclusion, in which you give inferences or implications that you draw from the information. After the conclusion comes the recommendations, in which you suggest how you think the situation could be improved in specific, achievable, and measurable ways. And if costs are involved, estimate the cost to achieve the improvement of the situation. So let me go through that briefly. So number 1, in the simple report, you have a summary called the executive summary or abstract, in which you just give a summary of the whole report, a brief summary. Number 2, you have the introduction to the report. Number 3, you have the main body of the report. Number 4, you have the conclusion of the report. And number 5, you have the recommendations as to how whatever issue you have dealt with can be solved or dealt with. Okay, so that's simple report writing. Now here is what is called memoranda format of report writing. Okay, first of all, you have to whom this memo, it's called memo for short, M-E-M-O, memo. A memo is a reminder. So number 1, you put to whom this report is being given. That is the person's name and the title that they have in that company, in that business, or whatever other title they have. In your case, it might be student. Later on, or right now, it might be evangelist. But it is some title that tells what kind of work you're doing. Number 2, the memo tells you from whom this memo is coming. And so the person gives their name and job title and puts their handwritten initials that is the first letters of their name, by it. Number 3, you give the date on which the memo is written. Number 4 is the subject, what the memo is about. Number 5 deals with the purpose of the memo, that is why the memo is written. And number 6 is a recommendation, how to improve the situation or correct the problem. Okay, sometimes I get memos from one of the lecturers who is in the administration. Memo concerning the need for me to hand in a plan of what I am going to teach for the entire trimester. The topic, the date on which it is to be taught, the different ways I'm going to be teaching this lesson to make it interesting. Okay, so that is done in a memo. Or it might be to remind me that there is to be a staff meeting. There was to have been a staff meeting on Tuesday of this week, but it was changed, I think, to the 19th of November. So I received a memo, a short reminder of what needs to be done. Now here are report writing guidelines. Number 1 is the title page, in which you give the name of the institution. In your case, it would be the Jamaica School of Preaching and Biblical Studies, followed by the course that you are giving a report on, followed by the particular or specific topic that you have been assigned to do a report on, and after that, your name and the date when you have handed in the assignment. That's the title page, all of that on one page. Okay, not every report follows the same format, but this is one that I believe that is followed in universities and colleges. The second thing is the abstract, which is a summary of the whole report, what the report is all about. Then you get into the report itself. Number 3 is the introduction, in which you state the subject that you are discussing and the background to this subject. And number 4, you have the discussion. That's the main part of the report, in which you present the relevant data or information, its analysis, which means you break the information down and you look closely at it. Interpretation, your explanation of the information, and application, how this information may be used. Then number 5, you have the conclusion of the report, which is a summary of the essential points in the discussion. After the conclusion, you have a page or pages in which you have the sources of information called references that should be numbered in the order in which they are referred to in the discussion of the report. So if you have a 1 in the discussion, there should be a 1 at the end, in which the source is the same information that you refer to in the discussion, in the part of the report dealing with that source of information. If you have another source in the discussion, let's say you have number 2 when you put down the name of the author and the date when his information was published, let's say 2019, then you should have a 2 at the very end of your report that corresponds to it, giving fuller information as to where you got that information. The name of the book, the publisher, the date of publication, even the page number or numbers that you got this information from. So sources of information should be numbered in the order in which they are referred to in the discussion of the report. Okay, let me go on to another lesson. Okay, so the next one here is called Types of Business Letters. The general objective is to examine types of business letters. And we're going to be looking at number one in the specific objectives. At the end of this lesson, the students will have identified 3 types of business letters. 2, at the end of this lesson, the students will have explained how to write each of the 3 types of business letters. Well, let us identify 3 types of business letters. One type is the letter of advice. And in the letter of advice, you may either be asking for advice or you may be giving advice. So we'll be looking at both of them. Number 2 is the letter of complaint. You are disappointed about what someone has done. Someone in your business transaction has not fulfilled what you had asked him or her to do, and you're writing a letter of complaint to the person who owns that business, asking him to address the problem or correct it. Number 3 is the letter of apology. So the person in charge of the business gets your letter of complaint and writes you a letter of apology saying how sorry he or she is that they did not fulfill their obligation and that they will not do this again. So 3 types of business letters: letter of advice, the letter of complaint, and the letter of apology. Now let us look at the letter of asking for advice. Here is the format of that kind of letter. You have the introduction. So in paragraph 1, you state the reason or reasons for writing. The main body, paragraphs 2 and 3, is a description of problem or problems. Number 3 is the conclusion, the final paragraph, closing remarks, signed with your full name. Okay, so you say why you're writing, paragraph 1. You describe the problem, paragraphs 2 and 3. And then in the final paragraph, you thank the person for the advice that they are going to give you, and you sign your name. Now let us look at language that you use for asking advice. In the opening remarks, that is paragraph 1, opening remarks, here are samples of what you could say in your opening remarks. I'm writing to ask you if you could help me with, and you state what you need help with. Or, I would appreciate if you could give me some advice about. You state what it is you need advice about. Or, I'm writing to ask for your advice, or could you possibly offer me your advice? Or, I wonder if you could help me with a problem. So this is the reason or reasons for writing. In your closing remarks at the end of the letter, This is some language you could use. I would appreciate it if you could give me your advice as soon as possible, or I look forward to receiving your advice, or it would be of great help if you could advise me. That's the letter of asking for advice. Now, here is the letter of giving advice. The format, number one, is the introduction. Paragraph 1, thanks for the letter, or express understanding of the problem. Number 2 is the main body of the letter, paragraphs 2 and 3, in which you can give suggestions for dealing with the problem or reasons, let us say why the problem exists and how it could be solved. Conclusion number 3, final paragraph, you give your closing remarks and you sign with your full name. And here is some language that can be helpful. In your opening remarks, you may say, thank you for your letter requesting, or I am writing in reply to your letter asking advice about, or I hope the following advice will be of some help to you. Number 2, in the main body, in which you are giving suggestions. Suggestions can be introduced as follows. I strongly recommend that, or I would suggest that, or I believe that the best course of action is, or I would advise you to, or you should, or you ought to, or if I were you, I would. And then number 3, your closing remarks. I trust you will accept this advice, or I hope this will be of help, or I would very much like to know if this was helpful. So that's the letter of giving advice. Now we come to the letter of complaint. Number 1, you need the address of the business that the complaint is being sent to, including the specific person who is in charge of the business that you have a complaint about. So that's the first thing in the letter, the business address that you have a problem with. Number 2 is re. Now, RE is an abbreviation for referring to, and it is a brief summary of what the complaint is about. Okay, so it says it is to be put under the address of the business, meaning referring to the problem in a very brief way, so that the person receiving the complaint about their business dealings may know in a second what the complaint is all about. Then number 3, your greeting. Dear Mr. or Mrs. or Miss, and the name of the person to whom the complaint is being addressed. Number 4, the first paragraph, state the problem. For example, the Church of Christ ordered 1,000 chairs from Kingston Parish in preparation for a tent meeting on a particular date, but only 500 chairs were delivered on that date. So you're stating the problem right there in the first paragraph. Number 5, second paragraph, impact of the problem on the tent meeting. A lot of visitors to the tent meeting had to stand up. Resolution of the problem: ask the person in charge of the business to immediately send the remaining 500 chairs by another date. And that would be the nearest possible date. Number 6, third paragraph, express the hope that there will be no more mistake made and that the right amount of chairs will be delivered by the new date. Number 7, fourth paragraph, thank the person in charge of the business and express the hope that he will fully cooperate or she will fully cooperate to solve the problem. And number 8, close the letter by saying, yours sincerely or yours respectfully, and then write your full name underneath these words. So this is the letter of complaint to a business. Here is the letter of apology. So this would be the person that you have written to complaining about them not fulfilling their business dealing with you. So here is a letter of apology. Dear, and you address the person by their title, Dr., Mr., or Mrs., or Miss. Number 2, the first paragraph should begin with a detailed account of the situation, include the date and time and where the error or mistake took place. Please accept my sincere apology for, and you put the on that line, what mistake you made. On, and you put the date when the mistake took place, and the time when the mistake took place. At, and you put the place where the error or mistake took place. Number 3, in the second paragraph, acknowledge the hurt and damage done and take full responsibility without making excuses. For example, you might write, I can appreciate how hurt or frustrated you are, given the consequences of my actions and the trouble I have caused. I take full responsibility for my behavior. It was wrong of me to act, say, behave as I did. There is no excuse for that type of behavior. Number 4, in the third paragraph, promise that it won't happen again, and include a statement of regret, and provide some way of easing the pain caused or form of restitution. That means restoring what has been lost, if appropriate. For example, please be assured that I have taken all the necessary measures so that this mistake never happens again. And number 5, end your letter by apologizing again and asking for forgiveness. For example, once again, I am truly sorry and humbly ask for your forgiveness. And then you close it, sincerely or respectfully yours, with one's full name signed underneath these words. Okay. Well, I think I've covered enough for today. It's now 20 after 2, and you'll be getting the customary 10 minutes of free time. So we have covered report writing, and we have covered types of business letters and the format of business letters. I covered these different lessons at one time because when you go to year 4, Anyone in here going to the fourth year in January, or you're not really certain at this time? It depends on your grades. All right. Well, I have a section about this long left in the syllabus to cover, because when you go to the fourth year, you go to the advanced section. So I'm trying to cover this remaining section. That's why I did these lessons together. Okay, so I'll be trying to finish this section as quickly as possible. It's mostly dealing with business transactions or dealings. Any question? Okay, well, thank you all for your participation. Thank you, viewers, for joining us for communication studies. And God willing, tomorrow we will be looking at apologetics. We're going to be looking at abortion. And then I will be revising what we have covered in looking at, number one, the acceptable sexual behavior. Number two, redefinition of marriage. Number three, looking at abortion, part one. Lesson 4, abortion, part 2. And lesson number 5, abortion, part 3. Now we're looking at this from 2 points of view. We're looking at the impact of the atheistic worldview on moral issues, and we're looking at God's point of view, how He looks at each of these: the proper sexual behavior, what marriage really means, and what He thinks about abortion. That's what we'll be doing, God willing, tomorrow, starting at 10:30 Eastern Standard Time, and then at 12:30, we will break for lunch, and at 1:30, God willing, we will look at world religions again. I will finish lesson 23, looking at the Acts of the Apostles, how people were converted from different religions to become Christianity, and in no time did the apostles or any persons from the churches spreading the gospel of Christ tell people you can be saved even though you remain in your religion. They were trying to persuade them to leave their religion, because without Jesus there can be no salvation. And after that I will be revising lessons 20 to 23, God willing, and that is in preparation for a test on world religions. Based on lessons 20 to 23, Jesus is the only Savior of the world, scheduled for next week, Thursday, God permitting. I think that's next week, Thursday, is November 13th. I think that's about it. So thank you all for joining, and we're now finished. At least my classes are finished for today. Thank you all.